2 for our video version of the painting class for the Clearwater Library. If you've already done the first one, you may already have your supplies, but I'm gonna just do a quick run through for anyone who's joining fresh on the second one. We're just gonna be using some basic primary colored paint, so we're gonna mix all of our colors from there. I made this decision so that you can buy one set of paints, and all the paintings that we'll be doing, we will be mixing from the same color so that you don't have to buy a ton of paint every time. You need a yellow right here, deep yellow, brilliant red, ultramarine blue, titanium white. Titanium white's the only one you may not have to get a new tube of as we go along, just because we will be using it for mixing quite a bit. And you will need a small amount of black paint. I'm just using some from a leftover tube of basics, but I believe Artist Loft also sells a smaller bottle, of the black paint. You will not be using very much of it, so you don't need a ton. For brushes, we will just need a large, sort of a medium, and then like a thinner brush for doing outlining. This was a $5 3-pack from Michael's. We'll need paper towels to dry our brushes off on, a disposable cup with water. I'm using mine from last session. Try and be a little bit conscious there. Paper plate will work for mixing. If you have palette paper, you can use that as well. I recommend the plate though, just because it keeps it from, getting onto your table. And then we will be using a square canvas each time. You are welcome to go smaller. You may want to get smaller brushes if you do that. You're also welcome to go larger, but you may use more paint. So just sort of be mindful of what you're using. All right, today we're going to do a fall still life painting. It's again going to be sort of an aerial shot. It's going to be very loosely rendered, very low stakes, so do not worry. But we are going to start out by laying out sort of a little tablescape. So we're going to be mixing 2 colors. We're going to be doing a fairly light yellow and then a deep purple. So we're going to start with the yellow first. Because it's going to be so light, we're going to start with our titanium white. Do a nice glob of that. I'm going to take our yellow. If you don't feel comfortable just kind of eyeballing it for mixing colors, I always put a little bit off to the side and you can kind of mix it as you go. It's easier to kind of mix in a little bit at a time than to go and have to redo the color. You end up wasting a lot of paint that way. So I'm going to start with about half of this yellow just to see where that gets us. I'm going to mix this in. Actually pretty nice. It's a pretty nice light yellow. So we're gonna actually just keep that. So we're gonna be doing a stripe of this across the canvas, so diagonal here. I'm gonna start up at the top, maybe 2 inches or so down. And I use the edge of my brush to kind of make more of a straight line. If you want to use your smaller brush to make the line and then fill it in with your larger brush, that's fine too. Just going to do a diagonal line like this. Get some of that excess paint. I'm going to be doing the same down here. You kind of want to mirror, I guess, the composition here. So start on this side, about the same distance down. You want to kind of keep your lines parallel as best as you can. If your lines get kind of weird, that's okay. We're going to be coming in with purple in here, so you can kind of straighten them out with the other color. I'm a very wobbly painter today. And then from there, we're just going to kind of loosely block in this color. It does not have to be super opaque. You don't need to lay the paint on very thick. It will make it harder to dry in between steps if you are a little heavier handed with the paint. But you can always pause the video and let it fully dry. Maybe put it in front of a fan and then come right back. I know some people like to paint really thick, and that's fine. But if you want to kind of do this in more like real time, thin layer is best. Just gonna coat this. Yours will probably look a little cleaner than mine. I've repurposed this canvas about 12 times now. So it's a little bumpy. But that's always a good thing to do. If you're not super stoked about a painting that you've made, I don't even bother with primer. I just brush some white paint over, and then I loosely paint my next painting on top. But you can always use gesso or primer if you're wanting to be very fancy with it. And use just about all of our paint, I guess. Mix the perfect amount. I paint fairly quickly, so if you find yourself running behind on a step, just pause the video. I'm a very very quick painter, and usually in the in-person class I would quickly paint it just to show, and then I would just kind of wait for people to catch up. But since I can't see you at home, just feel free to pause the video if you are painting a little slower. There's nothing wrong with that. All right, so we got our yellow mapped in. Make sure in between steps that you rinse your brush. Acrylic paint dries very fast, so we want to make sure we don't get our brushes all gummed up. Okay, I'm going to mix a deep purple. So purple, the quickest way to make purple is yellow, or to make brown is purple and yellow. But we're gonna make sort of like a brownish purple. So we're gonna start with a purple and incorporate just a little bit of yellow into it so that it is more of a muted fall color. So we've got a little bit of yellow left on the palette. You may too. I'm gonna make some purple off to the side. I want it to be a little more red heavy because I want it to be nice and warm for our fall painting. So I'm going to do a little extra of the red. I'm actually going to mix the colors into the red that I have. Let's see. I have not had my coffee yet this morning, so I might word things a little weird. Take half of this blue here. I'm going to mix it into this red. Now it's already like kind of a warm plum color. It's kind of nice. I'm just gonna take a tiny dab of yellow just to further warm it up. Maybe a tiny bit more. I don't know how subtle this is gonna be on the camera, but pretty dark. Now, a lot of these pigments, especially with these cheaper acrylics, they tend to not have a lot of opacity to them. The body tends to be a little watery. So I use titanium white a lot to sort of mix into the paint. We don't want to make it super light, but we want to give it a little bit of extra body. So we're just going to take a tiny bit and mix that in. Ooh, it's like a nice, like, warm eggplant kind of color. We're going to kind of just fill in what we haven't painted with this yellow. Now again, because this isn't super opaque, if you were kind of seeing through it like this, what you're gonna wanna do is just let it dry a little bit and do another coat. Colors like this are, especially purples, are kind of hard to get unless you're doing a lot of white in it, like a lavender. It just doesn't have much body to it, and you might have to layer it up. Do a little stripe down here. basically what we're gonna be painting today. So you're gonna have, this is sort of like a platter, like a long table runner type deal. And we're gonna be doing like a little pumpkin, some cinnamon sticks, and like a little leaf. And then this will have some pattern back here. Actually realizing how far down I made these, I'm gonna bring this up a little bit. Bring a little more of this purple into our field here, field of view. Again, I wouldn't worry about anything being too perfect. I usually like to layer up the colors as we go. So there's always going to be chances for you to sort of fix little things that you aren't super into in your painting. If you kind of make little mistakes or kind of want to adjust something, that's totally fine. Okay, so we've got some basic purple down. We will do another little layer of color on top. But this will do for now. So rinse our brush. And the next thing we're gonna do is sort of plot out the items on our platter here. So we're gonna be making a nice orange color. I want a nice bright orange. It won't be the final coat, so we're not letting this fully dry. We're just gonna be mapping it in, and then we'll be letting it dry in a few steps. So for our orange, you want it to be very yellow heavy. You can mix it in this light yellow field right here, that's fine. If you don't want to take up extra room on your plate. It's over here. Do a good amount, like a quarter-sized glob of paint. And off to the side, maybe do like a dime size of the red. So we can kind of mix it in slowly. I would start with maybe about half the red. See where that gets us. We want a nice medium orange. Actually, that might work right there. It's a nice medium orange. So we're gonna be putting this little pumpkin right here. We're gonna start with that, kind of loosely block in. Now you're gonna be looking at it from the top, but pumpkins are never round. They're always bumpy. So really don't worry about making this super clean. You just wanna get this kind of nice shape, almost like an orange. You know how oranges are never really round either, like those little tangerines. We're gonna be putting a stem here and putting out like a little. So you're gonna be kind of looking at it from like top diagonal view. This orange is also pretty translucent, but we will be putting several layers on here. So you just wanna get this pumpkin kind of roughed in. It's totally okay if you can see stuff below it. It will not matter once we are done. We do want to get a nice map of it in. We're going to be doing a leaf coming in off the side over here. Now the leaf will seem tricky, but we will get through it. So load up your brush with paint. We're going to just do like a little maple type leaf. It does not have to be perfect. And do a line down here for the front tip of the leaf. A line down like that. A little bit shorter. You don't want it the same length. A little bit shorter. And then up like this, a little bit shorter. So you make the tip of this leaf kind of go out like this. This one as well. Like this. And this one as well. I'm You know how like maple leaves have like little corners and ridges kind of coming off? You know, they're not just like one round leaf. So I'm gonna make one there. I'm gonna make one there. Just using the edge of our brush. Make this a little fatter down here. Make a little leaf kind of corner like that. Again, this is gonna be like a dried, crumpled up leaf. So it really, if you added like a little something that isn't there, it's really not that big of a deal. And you will have opportunity to sort of refine this as it goes. So piece of paint here. Just a basic leaf kind of coming into view from the side. Cool. I'm gonna do another one up here, just kind of coming up the top. I'm gonna just do a little less of the leaf up here. So we're just gonna do these little ones like we did, and then maybe a bigger one, like that. Again, don't feel like you have to fully paint this leaf right now. They were just kind of marking the spot. We will be layering it up. Gonna rinse our brush, and on this same spot we're gonna make some dark brown to sort of map in, just more of a medium brown. We're gonna kind of map in some shadows beneath this, and then our little cinnamon stick bundle. So we will start with yellow again. Put a nice kind of medium-sized glob there. Actually, we still have red and we still have blue from our purple. So let's try and mix from what we've got. I'm going to put a nice little glob of red into that yellow, kind of making this orange again. I'm going to take a tiny bit of blue, start to mix that in. Already giving us sort of this medium warm, like a sienna brown. So we're gonna mix in a tiny bit more blue and a tiny bit more red. Kind of get it a little bit darker. We don't need it super dark yet, because we're just snapping it in. So our little cinnamon stick bundles will be coming in off the side here. So we're just gonna use our wide brush. I'm gonna sort of curve the bottom. Like that. We'll be defining this in a little bit, but for now we just kind of want to block it in. Taking some of this and just kind of starting to create a little bit of shadow underneath these objects we're putting in. So take a tiny part of this pumpkin here and just sort of lightly brush out from it. Not have to be exact, just sort of plotting it in. I know on camera right now it's a little hard to differentiate the brown. Everything kind of looks warm on screen. So hopefully in real life you've got it looking a little more brown. looks brown in here. But I'm gonna do a little bit of this under the leaves as well. You just kind of cut under, softly brush out. I'm actually gonna mix this a little bit darker just so you can see it a little bit better. If you've got the brown that you like already and cool, I'm just gonna make it a little bit darker for you guys to see. I want to make sure it looks the way it's supposed to look for you. It's not so confusing. If you're wanting to make yours darker, all you have to do is put a little more red and a little more blue. You're just kind of adding pigment. Let's see if this shows up a little bit better. Yeah, I think that works a little bit better for the camera. Again, we're just blocking in, so don't feel too worried about getting it right the first time. Get a little bit of these shadows. Which we will soften up later too, so if you feel like you've messed up, don't worry, we will fix it. Alright, we will be adding more detail to what we've put here, but we do have to let this stuff dry. So we're gonna pause and take a little break. Should take like 10-15 minutes for this to dry. But we want it to be totally dry before we start putting more colors on so we don't pull up the paint that we've put down. All right, so we will be right back. Make sure to rinse your brushes and we'll come back and mix the next color. All right, we are back. By now our painting should be pretty dry. Be able to paint over this stuff, no problem. The next color we are going to mix is a much lighter orange than what we originally put down. So again, we're going to start with a lot of yellow. Gonna put some of that down, maybe like a quarter size. I still have a little bit of red on my palette that's not quite dry, and a little white. If you don't have either, I would consider adding both right now. Because it's going to be a lighter orange, we are going to use a little less red, but a little more white. So just need a little scoop of red like that. Gonna mix into our yellow. Get this nice medium orange. It looks very similar to that, so we're going to add a nice chunk of white in there to lighten it up. You want to make sure it's considerably lighter than what we have down, but not so light that it isn't orange anymore. Want it to be a nice warm orange color. Okay, so this is just going to be another layer of color. This is not going to be the final finish on any of these things. Just gonna kind of break it up a little bit. We're gonna be painting the little sections of this pumpkin. So this, what's gonna happen is this darker orange is gonna act sort of as the cracks for the sections. So you're gonna be painting this as the main color for the pumpkin, and then we'll be putting more accent colors over top. So you wanna kind of loosely mark out where the stem's gonna be. You don't want it in the middle. You want it kind of more toward the top because we are kind of looking at the top down. So I'm gonna mark this here. And then we're going to just section it off like this, kind of want to follow the curve of your pumpkin. And do one section like that. Then you leave a space and paint the next section down. You want to make sure you're following this curve. You don't want to do straight lines out. It will not look like a pumpkin if you do that. It will look like the cross section of an orange, which could be cool, but not for this painting. I'll come down here, do another little section. When you get down to these edges, you can kind of come out past your orange like that. To kind of make it look like it's a little more bumpy at the bottom. Another one here. Now this color, because it has a little more white, it's going to be more opaque, so you can kind of see that it's going to cover pretty nicely. But it's still nice to have some of that darker orange kind of coming through here. Probably do two more, so we'll do this one up here, up top, and then one right next to it. So we got these little pumpkin sections mapped out. It's already looking like a little pumpkin. And we're gonna use some of this on the leaf as well. So I wanna kind of use the same idea. We wanna use this darker orange as maybe the veins in the leaf. So we're going to kind of just, I use the edge of the brush, kind of tap out where we want these veins running down the center of this leaf. And then down the center of this bigger section here. That makes sense. I'll hold the canvas up so you can kind of see it a little more. We're just loosely mapping this in. This is pretty low pressure here. Making a vein down here and this way up here as well. You can see it. If you can't see it super well, no sweat. This is gonna be very easy. So I'm gonna use our big brush and kind of just paint like big sections like that away from where that vein would be. You don't have to be super precise with this. This is just adding a little bit of texture to this leaf. So we get a little bit of variety on this leaf. It's not just like a one flat color. And come up here and do the same thing. Just a little bit on the leaf. The leaf is pretty crinkly, so we're just gonna be kind of dabbing it. It's not very formulaic. It's just gonna be a pretty textured little leaf here. If you wanna kind of make sure you've got a little more coverage in some spots, you can, just a little variety. Spots missing on my pumpkin, so I'm gonna kind of come back in here. Perfect. Now we're gonna be mixing another darker orange to kind of go back in and layer up some more color. So you can actually use the same light orange that you have. Because we do want it to have quite a bit of body, so we're just gonna put a little bit of yellow onto it and a tiny bit, maybe about half as much of red. I'm gonna mix this. And we're gonna do this while this lighter orange is still wet, it'll make it a little bit softer. So on the pumpkin, we're just gonna put a little bit of texture like this to kind of indicate that there's a shadow. The light source is sort of on the top, so we're gonna just sort of loosely mark in some shading on this pumpkin. And if you don't like some of your edges in here, you can kind of use this color as well to sort of soften like where the sections are in your pumpkin. We're also going to use it a little far in the leaf. We're going to put a little bit of color back into this leaf. If you want to like make the little veins in your leaf with this, you can. You don't have to. You can keep it a little more subtle. But we just want to make sure there's plenty of coverage in this color. There we go. We're also going to be putting a little bit of this orange into this cinnamon stick bundle. So not a ton, just a little bit. I'm going to do on this side here. I'm going to do another kind of stripe like that. Another stripe like that. Another one toward the end. Just to kind of start to show that it's a bundle of cinnamon sticks. I can even put a little bit like this down toward the front. But again, this is a very loose mapping out, so don't worry too much about it. Now, the next step we're going to do is we're going to put a little bit of marking on this platter here so that it's not so plain. And we're going to be using a base off of this same color. So you're going to keep whatever's on your brush, and on your palette kind of squish it off your brush to the side. We're just going to mix a tiny bit of blue into this. So you're going to put your blue off to the side. It makes it a little more comfortable to mix and not, you know, put it right into your paint. Just grab a little bit and then mix it like so. You want to kind of get this warm gray color, grayish green. We're going to be using it very, very sparingly. So what I'm going to do is sort of water my brush down, dry it off, pick up a little bit of this warmer gray color, and we're just going to lightly do a stripe on both the top and bottom of this painting. And to sort of just indicate that there's like a lip to this platter or an edge to this runner, whichever you kind of want to decide it's going to be. It's up to your interpretation. You want to make sure it runs kind of behind your leaf here. But again, this isn't a very structured line. It's just to kind of break up what we're seeing here. You want a nice clean line, use the edge of your brush like this. And kind of just brush away from it. But if you like that real soft, edgy look, you can just sort of swipe side to side. I'm gonna do the same up here again. Now we will be coming back with white and sort of just putting a gloss on here. If you want to make it a runner, you'll be able to make little threaded textures. But if you'd like to keep it like a long platter type of dish, we'll be putting just like a white sheen on it. Since that's the easier option, that's the one I'll be demonstrating. But I like to make my paintings sort of open-ended so that everyone can kind of make their own interpretation, switch things up, add different things, however they see fit. All right, so I've got that. We're also gonna loosely kind of dry brush some of these shadows away from this and kind of just make a little more textured overall. So once you get your stripes down here the way you want them, you're gonna dry off your brush, kind of really lightly tap it back onto that paint, and you're just gonna lightly brush away from those shadows that you made before with that kind of medium brown tone. Some people like more of a watery texture and don't prefer to dry brush. If that's the case, all you're doing is dipping in and kind of watering down what you have. I'm not a fan of that look. I think it kind of requires more work. I like more of the texture, but everybody's different. So really do whatever you see fit. And we're also going to add a little bit of this to this side of the cinnamon sticks. And I'm going to dry brush some texture kind of all over the plate, just really, really faintly. Just because I really don't like really big plain fields. I like for paintings to look like paintings. I like to be able to see the texture of the brush. It's the beauty of it being different from like photography, is that we get to kind of make things a little more gestural and textured. The last spot we're gonna put this in is on the pumpkin and the leaves. I'm just gonna kind of loosely brush a little bit onto the pumpkin. Ooh, careful that you don't pick up paint like I just did. Gotta be a nice light hand. If you do pick up paint, let it dry, take your same color, kind of coat it over. It does happen with acrylics. Sometimes they dry fast, sometimes they're a little slow. Put a little bit of this in these leaves as well. Just to kind of give them a little dimension. I like to kind of carry these colors all throughout the painting. Okay, starting to come together. We're gonna wash out our brush. We're gonna mix a couple colors here while this is drying. The first color we're gonna mix is sort of similar to this color, but a little more opaque. So it's gonna be like a nice medium brown. We're gonna start with yellow again. Going to take, actually I still have a little bit of white, but you will need white. If you're out, put a little bit on your palette. Put a teeny bit of red on your palette. I've still got some blue. So first we're going to mix a nice scoop of white, about that big, into your yellow. Gonna give us a nice base. You want this to be a nice opaque light brown color. We're gonna mix a tiny bit of red. A dot or so more. Gonna get this lighter orange color. The camera looks very yellow, but this is a little more muted in real life. We're gonna do a dot of blue. Now it's looking a little cool for my taste, so I'm gonna add a little more red. It's actually pretty nice. So I want it to be darker than this palette here, but lighter than these darker colors that we have. It's going to be sort of just a light accent color, and then we're going to go in with a really dark brown and sort of define some of these items that we have. So unless your paint is super wet, in which case you'll want to pause the video and let it dry a bit, but mine's just a little bit tacky, so I can kind of start on it. We're going to start with these cinnamon sticks. We're going to define them just a little bit more. And do a nice like line here, here. Gonna break it up. Another one there. I'm gonna do a couple little accent marks like this. We'll be coming back through and defining it with the darker brown. We just want to get some dimension in this little bundle here. The next thing we'll be doing is this pumpkin stem and a little accents on this pumpkin. So I'm going to put a little bit into the pumpkin body itself, just so the color isn't just a flat orange. There's some dimension. I like to just loosely add it in. How easy it is to see on the camera, but we'll be doing the same with the leaves. You can kind of just, I mean, the leaves are crumpled up dried leaves, so there's not a lot you can do to really mess them up. As long as you have a leaf shape, when we go in with the darker brown, you'll be able to kind of loosely draw out the leaf, and it's very hard to make it not look like a leaf. So if you're feeling like you're not really sure where to put these colors, we are just sort of making this up, so it's really okay. We will make this look like a leaf. And then I'm going to also just sort of really, really loosely, again, put a little bit of this onto the platter. So you can double soften your shadows around here. Just get a nice texture going in these areas. It's a nice color to just soften what you've already put down. If you feel like you've got some harsh lines somewhere, you're not really into that, you can go through with this color. It's a nice medium color, and sort of fix it up. But I like keeping the painting pretty loose until the end, where we start to put in some little details. It really ties it all together. Rinse out our brush. Before we get to this really dark color, the brown color, we are going to kind of reinforce this purple area, and then we're gonna let it dry for just a minute before we start adding all the little details at the end. So we're gonna return to this kind of maroon plum color. So we're gonna start with our red. A nice like dime-sized amount. I still have some blue to mix into it, and I have a little bit of orange left that I'm gonna kind of go in there to make it a little warmer. If you don't have any of this orange or yellow left, you can just put a dab of yellow on your palette, and that'll also help you warm up this purple. I'm going to take this leftover blue. It's not a ton, it's just a little bit. Mix it in here. It's still looking pretty red, so I'm gonna add a little more blue to my palette. Sometimes you can get away with like whatever you've got on there. Sometimes you gotta add a little more. Okay, we'll take another little dab. Go into it. And take a little bit of this orange I've got. It's looking nice. If you don't have a white on your palette, I just realized mine's all used up. Put another little dot. We will be using it quite a few times. So I'm just gonna take a tiny dab, mix in. So this is just a slightly more opaque version of this plum. So slightly lighter, which is nice to kind of add texture to your paintings when you're layering up. You can either start with a darker or a lighter tone. I like to start with darker and then add the texture over top. It makes it a little more dimensional. When you have that dark kind of shining through still, it's really nice. So we're gonna just add a little more to this. And if you want to clean up the edges of your plate, now is a good time. So this is a nice thick paint we've got. Clean that up. I'm just going to very loosely paint in this dark purple here. Same up top. Make sure we've got this coverage here. Cool. And the last thing we're going to do with this little bit of purple, just to kind of tie it into the rest of the painting so it doesn't seem like it's just isolated to the corners. I'm going to use it to sort of undercut my shadows here. Just really lightly. If you want to use a small brush for this, feel free. I tend to use the big brush a lot for like the entire painting. So please, if you're not comfortable using the big brush, just feel free to switch to a smaller brush. I just like the big brush because to me, it makes it look more like a painting that you can see the little edges and the little mistakes because you're using a larger brush. It's just more gestural. It kind of forces you to be a little more simplistic and not so detail oriented. So we'll put that there. I'm gonna put a tiny bit, not much, just underneath my little leaf edges here. Up here as well. So it lifts off a little bit. Gonna define that. And then we'll toss a tiny bit underneath this cinnamon stick bundle. And then last but not least, we are going to use it in this edge here on this platter or runner, whichever you've decided. Again, we're kind of keeping this stuff a little looser, so don't feel pressured. It's gonna be a nice fall painting. Cool. All right, the last thing we'll use this purple for, just because we're gonna get it mapped out a little bit before it dries. I'm gonna take my smaller brush, dip it in, and I'm just gonna loosely sketch out where this pumpkin stem is going to be, because we are gonna go back with darker brown and kind of reinforce everything. So for now, I'm going to kind of do this little half circle right here. And then I'm gonna slowly kind of bring it up, like a little weird top. Pumpkin stems are always a little wonky, so don't feel like it has to be straight. Like, kind of the more crooked it is, the better. See, it's a little small, hard to see. But you just want this like to be a little oval and then the little stem coming up. I'm just gonna loosely brush it in. This is not gonna be the final coat on it, so don't feel like you have to get it totally colored in. We will be putting some darker brown to kind of help define it. But for now, that's a good placeholder so that we can kind of see what we're doing when we come back. All right, we're gonna pause the video, let everything dry before we come in and do the final details of this painting. Make sure you rinse your brush, don't leave it, let it dry, and we'll be right back. All right, we are back again for the last little bit of this fall painting. We're gonna be just working on details for the rest of the time. We're gonna be mixing a nice deep dark brown. So the first thing we're gonna need, jump back in here, gonna need a little dab of yellow. Okay, not a lot. A little dab of red. And we are gonna be using a little bit of black. I suggest putting just a tiny dab off to the side that you can kind of pull from with your brush. You're not going to need very much. Okay. Just going to mix this yellow and red. It's going to make like a dark orange because we're going to use equal parts red and yellow. Let's take a tiny dab of the black and mix that in. This should make like a really deep, kind of like a burnt sienna brown. It's gonna be the darkest color we have on here. And we're gonna be using our small brush because we're just gonna be using this color for some little details. But I'm gonna use my big brush for the first couple of things. The first thing we're going to do with this dark brown color is create an edge underneath this platter just on the bottom. So it's pretty subtle because it's dark purple, it's pretty dark. So we're just gonna put a line, kind of brush away from it like so, just to make a little bit of a shadow. And we're gonna be doing a tiny bit of that as well underneath this pumpkin. You can switch to the little small brush now if you'd like. I'm just gonna use it for a couple more things. Just to make that bottom of that pumpkin really stand out. I'm gonna do the same thing under here. These cinnamon stick bundles. Now you can rinse this brush and switch to your smaller one. I'm actually gonna use my small square brush and use the edge of it a lot to get kind of a thinner line. So let's start with these cinnamon sticks because they're a little more difficult, so we're gonna get them out of the way. And we've already kind of started defining like where each stick is. So we're just gonna kind of follow what we've already put down. I'm gonna do a line right here. Have an outline on this side. You can kind of bring it in. My brown is not quite as dark as I'd like. It's still a little close to this dark brown we made before, so I'm gonna put a tiny bit more black into it. Not a lot, just a little bit. Just to help kind of pop this against the brown that we have in this area. Alright, that's much better. So again, we'll kind of outline. We'll see that this right here is one stick. This is pretty gestural, so if you don't have it clearly defined, you can just kind of make it up. But we're gonna kind of use these little lines we already used to make the sticks. So I've got about 4 pretty well-defined sticks here. One of them is kind of underneath the others. I'm just gonna do that. Now we're kind of seeing the front end of these cinnamon sticks, so we're also gonna put like a little circle like that. Because you know when you see the front end of the cinnamon stick, it's like wrapped, it's like the bark that's wrapped. So we're gonna make sure we see a little bit of that in the front. And these sticks are, it's kind of hard to see. So we got these sticks under here. This is where the other sticks are underneath. So we're just going to kind of round out a couple of those as well. So it looks like they're stacked up. A nice little bundle of cinnamon sticks. Now on these fronts, because they are wrapped quite a bit, we're gonna put a couple little lines like that, making it look like they're kind of have many layers wrapped. And to emphasize this, I'm gonna put a couple little lines in the stick as well, kind of showing where maybe it's cracked or where there's the top seam. So we'll kind of do like this. Don't have to go all the way across. You just want to put like a little bit of texture in these sticks here. Again, we're just kind of keeping this loose. It's just kind of a figurative painting. It's more gestural. It's not going to be super detailed and realistic, so don't feel like you have to make this look like a real cinnamon stick. I'm gonna put a little bit more of this dark under here for the shadow. And since I darkened this up, I'm just gonna put a little bit more under this pumpkin, make it stand out a little bit more. And on our edge as well. Cool, it's a little bit darker. Now we're gonna be doing some thinner lines on the pumpkins and leaves. So what I like to do is dip my brush just a little bit. It makes the paint glide really nicely when you're trying to do really tiny areas. So we're gonna start with this stem. I'm gonna kind of put a little bit of an outline like so on the stem. And we're gonna make like a top, kind of like you're seeing where the stem is cut off. Put a little outline here. And we're just gonna pump some of this darker brown just on this side. So it kind of looks like there's light hitting it on this side. I'm gonna put a little bit of this accent on the pumpkin itself. You're not gonna outline the whole thing. You're just gonna put a teeny bit of this dark brown to kind of just help the painting stand out a little bit. It's a nice way to sort of add some texture. If you've got some weird areas, like I'm not even gonna correct this. I think it looks kind of neat that it's popping out. It just makes it look more like a painting, a little more raw. Obviously, if you're a stickler for everything being really smoothed and perfect, you can kind of come back, make another light platter color and come back and really tighten up those edges. I really don't think it's necessary though, personally. It's up to personal preference. I'm just gonna lightly put in these little marks just to make it look, you know, stand out a little bit. Already you can see that this pumpkin is really popping out. So we're gonna do the same thing with the leaves. A tiny bit of water. We're gonna kind of crisp up the under edges where those shadows are. We're not gonna paint away and do like a thick shadow because the leaves are thin. They're not casting such a large shadow. We wanna make them look like they're lifting off just a little bit. Do that up here. You do a little bit on the edges where you don't quite have a shadow yet. You just kind of want to define where they are. And then just like the pumpkin, we're just going to put a little bit of detail in the leaves to just make sure that they don't look so flat. So you can put a tiny bit really, really thin. I get that thin line by just using the very edge of my squared off brush here. If you use the more thicker outline, you're gonna get a thicker line because this brush tends to widen out as you go. But if you just use the thin edge of this brush really lightly, you get a nice little line. Nice thin line. I'm gonna do that to these leaves here. And then we're gonna just sort of hint at these little veins. So what you want to do is you want to have this main vein coming down all the way to where you'd imagine the stem being off here. And this vein will come off, same here. And then these little corners that you have coming off the leaves, they're gonna have little veins, but they're gonna go tie into those big veins. And we're just gonna put a couple little offshoot ones to make it a little more leafy looking. See? A nice little leaf. Do the same up here. It's really light. Cool. I'm also gonna use some of this dark to put some crumbs kind of around the cinnamon sticks. I'm gonna put a little bit near the leaves too, just to kind of make it look like this is just a very festive fall table. There's maybe like potpourri, just like little, just want to make it look pretty natural. Kind of get that visual interest a little bit. If you need to tighten up any of the edges on your platter, this is a good color to do it with. I'm gonna do just a little bit up here, really thin. Again, you don't have to do this. You can leave it a little more soft. I'm gonna just put a tiny bit of emphasis where this platter dips down. Another thing you can do with this color, if you wanted, if you're gonna make this more of like a tablecloth runner, you could, again, lightly dip it and use that thin edge, and you could make some little thread marks. Whatever you do, just keep them all going in the same direction so it doesn't look a little odd. Yeah, I think that looks good. Okay, we're done with this dark color. Now this next color seems like it would not fit, but believe me, it will look really cute. We're going to do sort of like a coral hot pink type color, just to kind of brighten up. This is a lot of muted, earthy colors, so we're just gonna make it have a nice little pop of color. I'm primarily gonna use red for this. So you want to put a little red down. It's not gonna take very much. And we will be using some white. So we'll be using white for the next two colors. So what you might want to do is put a nice maybe like a nickel sized glob down, and we'll kind of share it for both colors. So we're going to be mixing another color with white shortly. But we've only got a couple more colors to go, and then we'll be all done with this. So with this corally color, it's really weird. It's going to be sort of like a light pink, so, or a bright pink, I guess. We take some white, a little scoop, just mix it right into the red. This is actually spot on the color that we want. It's this nice, kind of like a dark bubblegum color. It's still warm because we're just using the red, so it will look really nice with this, but it'll sort of pop out against all these oranges and browns that we've got going on here. I'm gonna use my small brush for this as well, just because we are doing small details with this. Nothing big. So we're going to mostly use this to create sort of a plaid type pattern on this purple, but we're going to be carrying this color into the leaves, a tiny bit on the pumpkin and cinnamon. Even if it's technically not there in real life, it'll just make your painting look kind of cohesive and fun. So we'll use this small brush. And again, we're going to be using the edge so we can make some nice thin lines. So I'm going to start not parallel with this platter. I'm going to do it slightly askew just to make it a little more interesting and not so formulaic. So I'm going to just lightly do some thin lines like this. Make sure you've got enough paint. Don't push down too hard, you'll have a nice thick line. I mean, if that's what you'd like, you are more welcome to do that. But if you're trying to get this thin sort of plaid threaded effect, you want to press very, very light. Let's kind of thicken this one up a little bit. They don't have to be perfect. This is just a nice loose painting anyway. You want to keep them parallel to each other and spaced the same width apart. You want to kind of keep that in mind when you're going up here. Keep in mind, some people will take a ruler and line it up like so. I just kind of eyeball it, but if you want to make sure it looks like it's all part of the same tablecloth underneath here, you might want to just kind of figure out a good way, like either a piece of paper, a ruler. I would just be careful not to touch any of your wet paint, but you want to have them mostly running the same direction to the best of your ability. Once we've gotten those lines in, mine got a little askew here. That's what I get for freehanding it. We're gonna run lines in the opposite direction to make like squares. So sometimes it helps to turn your canvas so you can kind of see what would make like a right angle. And you want to just run it in the same direction, the same width. I'm kind of stopping a little short at the bottom of the platter just so it looks a little darker, like it's under a shadow. But up here I'm bringing it straight to the platter's edge. So we got that nice fall pattern here. And we kind of want to match that here, kind of eyeball it. And make these nice squares. Cool. And it looks like we got a nice little fall tablecloth behind here. To carry this color through, I'm gonna start with a little bit on the pumpkin. I'm gonna put just like a tiny bit in some of the cracks, maybe down here where there's like a little bit of that shadow. I do this with a lot of my paintings. I'll put these unexpected little pops of color. We'll put some in the stem. I just think it helps carry the color theme throughout the painting. It just looks nice. Put a little bit in these leaves here. Get some nice variety in these leaves finally. They haven't seen much of the action in here, this painting. And then finally, we're gonna put a tiny bit in the cinnamon sticks. Again, not a lot. Just gonna put a little bit. Just a little pop of color. This is a cool color if you want to kind of redefine some of these fronts of the sticks where we made them look like they're rolled. Put a little bit of detail in there. All right. You can actually, if you want to get even a little cooler with it, if you are making this a runner, threaded, you can put some of these as this color as threads. And you can also, how we were doing a little bit of this like crumbs here, little pieces of cinnamon, pieces of leaf, potpourri type deal. This kind of makes the painting a little more interesting. Nice fall palettes. Make sure you rinse your brush out. We're getting toward the final colors here. The next color we're gonna do, actually I have two left. We're just gonna do white at the very end, but for now we're gonna do a really nice rich yellow, kind of like a golden yellow. So we're gonna need this pinkish color that we made and this glob of white. So we're gonna take a little more yellow to the side, do a nice, kind of like dime-sized amount. We wanna give it some body by adding some of this white. So you should have a pretty good amount of white left. I'm just gonna use about half of mine because I'm still gonna use the little bit of white for the very end. So I'm just gonna take a chunk like that. It's maybe 2 parts yellow, 1 part white. I'm gonna mix that. And to make it a little more of a golden yellow, we're gonna take a tiny little swipe of that pinkish color and just mix it in. Actually might need more than a little swipe. I don't have a ton left on this palette. But yeah, just to mute it a little bit so it's not quite like a bumblebee yellow. It's like a little more in matching with our palette here. We're gonna use this to highlight a little more on the leaves, a little more on the pumpkin, a little bit on our tray, and we're gonna put some twine on these cinnamon sticks. It's gonna look really cute. So I'm gonna use my big brush. If you feel more comfortable with a small brush, go ahead and do that. I'm gonna put a little bit of paint on the top of this pumpkin here. Already it's making it look like the pumpkin's much shinier. I like using the big brush because it kind of makes the shapes for you. You don't have to like map out where you're gonna do it, because I'm just doing little bits here just to make it look like it's got a nice light source from the top. I'm gonna put a little bit into the leaves as well. I'm gonna make them look all crinkly and dried. Nice fall leaves. I'm gonna put a tiny bit, wipe some of this paint off of my brush, put a little bit into this platter. I'm gonna smooth out a couple of these areas, maybe soften this shadow I've got going on here. And put a little bit into these lighter fields here. I'm essentially dry brushing with it at this point. I wiped most of the paint off, so it's just nice and soft. Just get a little bit of richness in on this platter color. We're gonna take the smaller brush. I'm gonna use my little more of an outline one. I'll use this for the white as well. And we're gonna just put a little bit of this twine on this bundle of cinnamon sticks. Just gonna follow the curve of this bundle here. Now if your paint's dragging too much, just dip it a tiny bit in water so you can get a nice coverage. and do like a little knot at the top. Maybe drag this twine down. We will be defining this with some white as well. So kind of hard to see, but it'll be a lot easier to see once we got it down. Once we get this white in here, I'll put a little bit of accent on this string. You can also just leave it as the bundle like this. You don't have to put a knot and, you know, trail the ends off. That's just what I'm doing. And then with this small brush, I'm also going to put a little bit of highlight onto this stem here, just to make it look a little more textured. This little stems are always so gnarly and got a lot of going on, so that looks nice. I'm gonna rinse that out, and then we're gonna do the white as the final step. Now, if you've gotten the yellow on pretty thick, you might want to just let it dry, like pause and let it dry. Mine is pretty thin, so I'm gonna keep going. I am gonna start with the big brush though. I'm gonna put a little bit of white sheen on this platter, and I think the bigger brush will work really well for that. So I can do some large swipes and not have like tiny little brush marks. I get a nice amount of white on my brush here. I'm just gonna do like a shine mark like that. And a little bit in this white field. Down here. If you are making this into more of like a table runner, at this stage you would take your thin brush and kind of just make some little threaded texture. It's up to you. Maybe a little out here. I'm gonna use my big brush to do the highlights on the pumpkin as well, just because I really liked how that yellow turned out. So get more on my brush, and then not covering the yellow, just kind of inside the yellow, just sort of do a little bit of this white. So it looks nice and shiny. Sweet. Put that back. Take my little brush. Do a tiny bit of highlights on the leaves. Let's see. Maybe just like a tiny bit on where these veins are, just to kind of make them look like they have some dimension. Maybe some of the edges where the leaf is lifting up. I'm just doing a tiny bit like that. Nothing major though, the leaves for the most part are done. So again, we're just adding a little bit of texture. And then last but not least will be the twine. So on the twine, I'm gonna just put highlights on the tops of the twine. So do this piece that's trailing off. I'm just gonna kind of dab my brush to show that it's like kind of a bumpy, like threaded string. Gonna do a little bit on this knot here. And then across the band on the top. Now because I still have some of this dark brown left, I'm actually going to use it to help define the twine. I know I said white was our last step, but since I still have some on the palette, this will actually make it look really nice. Let's reanimate some of this real quick. Get a little bit of this darker on the brush. What I'll do is I'll come on the underside and sort of just create a shadow where the twine is. If you need to mix a darker color to do it again, you just make it like that brown we made before. Even just a little bit of yellow and a little bit of black can make a nice, really dark accent color. Let's see if you can see it a little bit better. It's very loosely rendered. It's not, you know, this isn't hyper realism. We're just trying to kind of convey a little fall tablescape. So don't be too hard on yourself if this isn't like a masterpiece or super realistic. That's not really what we're going for. All right, we are done with our fall tablescape. If you wanted to take this painting further, I don't think you need to, but if you wanted to, you could add more color in this plot up here. You could do maybe like a teal. That would be kind of cool. You could put like more trinkets around here. You could put like little candies, paint like, you know, the round like wrapped candies. Or you could just leave it as is. You could always put more texture into this, do more like potpourri flakes, that type of thing. But honestly, I think this is a really nice little fall painting. So next time we will be painting a winterscape, some tree lines covered in snow. It'll be really nice, easy pastel colors. We will be using the same paints though, so keep these paints if you want to join on the next one, and we will see you then. Thank you so much.